Yeah, insert less optimistic and upbeat cold open compared to yesterday's show. How did we just lose Dante Moore? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Like, comment, subscribe, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Appreciate those as well. So, how did that just happen? Why did that just happen? How is it going? Is the sky falling? Is everything a disaster? For those of you who have listened to me for a while, it may not surprise you to say that my biggest takeaway here is no, this is not a disaster. No, this is not an indictment on Dan Lanning as a recruiter. No, this is not an indication that everything is about to collapse within the program. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, how in the world did Dante Moore end up decommitting from Oregon and flipping to UCLA? I think there are a number of things at play here. First of all, playing time is something that Dante Moore may very well value. And UCLA, as I talked about on yesterday's show, added a transfer quarterback from Kent State, who grades as a 4-star transfer. But in the grand scheme of things, if you're Dante Moore and you are looking at where you are going to play most quickly or have the best chance at least to compete for the starting job, the answer is certainly UCLA over Oregon. I don't know that it's particularly close if it's just between those two schools, which were the only ones in the running because Michigan State had already added their quarterback for 2023. And the buzz there, everything I've heard, was never really that legit. So UCLA got their hat into the ring, and Dante Moore ended up choosing him. And if he's a guy, and he is certainly a talented enough recruit at this point in time to start as a true freshman, if that's his expectation, then yes, this is the right decision for him because going up against, I think Colin Schlee is the guy's name from Kent State, whoever that is, combined with Ethan Garbers, who probably is going to transfer out of that quarterback room anyway, is not as difficult of a thing to do as going in and starting over Bo Nix. Because whomst among us would say that Bo Nix would not win the starting job compared to Dante Moore, even if Dante Moore is really good. Bo Nix coming back. We're all excited about that, right? I talked about it on yesterday's show. I will talk about it more on tomorrow's show. I'm also pushing off the Kyrie Jackson talk because this news came down, but there is a very clear distinction at this point in time between who we want to start in 2023 and who could start in the future. And we all wanted Bo Nix because that's the best option. He is the best option. 100%. And he's a great option, lest I remind you that he was right in the thick of the Heisman conversation when Oregon was on that 8-game winning streak. And there are a lot of good things about Bo Nix coming back. But it limited the potential for Dante Moore to start as a true freshman. And there are some guys who want to do that. So that's one reason. The second thing, and you can't overlook this. You really can't. And unfortunately, because of scheduling and such, I won't be able to get John on this week. But I have been able to talk to him, so I will relay to you what our recruiting insider here at the Locked On Network has told me. And that is that if Kenny Dillingham never leaves, this probably doesn't come to fruition. And Dante Moore stays. But that opened the door. Dante Moore clearly wanted to go somewhere based on the caliber of programs he was looking at that was more in the national spotlight and not a rebuild. That's why he didn't follow him. You would think down to Arizona State. And I think that's a pretty smart thing to do because they're at least 2 years away from really being good, maybe more. We'll see how all of that goes. But he's looking for a place that he could come in and play early, play often, and be able to compete and win at a high level. And UCLA can offer him that. UCLA can 100% offer him that. But John has reiterated that if Kenny Dillingham never leaves, Dante Moore probably signs with Oregon tomorrow. Instead, he's going to sign with UCLA. So for anyone who is looking at this saying, well, does that mean we're not going to be able to get big-time players? Does that mean recruiting is falling off? Does that mean this? Does that mean that? The answer is no. This is just the world of sports and college football. It's the way that it is. You don't have to love every aspect of it, but coaches move. Players now can move way more than they ever have before. But this was very heavily influenced by Kenny Dillingham, who, before I could even get the question out of my mouth when I talked to Dante in Los Angeles, said the biggest reason that he dropped Oregon. So it doesn't mean that Will Stein is not a good offensive coordinator. It doesn't mean Dan Lanning is a head coach. It doesn't mean either are poor recruiters. It just means that it's about individual relationships, and Dan assembled a staff that he used to go out and recruit. And whereas, sometimes it felt like Mario was the biggest recruit on the previous staff, Lanning, I think, does a lot of recruiting himself, obviously on both sides of the ball, but he also trusts his coordinators to go get some of these recruitments and commitments done. And that's what you have to do. You can't do it all yourself as the head coach, right? You can do a lot of it. You should be heavily involved, but your coordinators are really important for this very reason, because they are building the relationships, because they're going to be the play callers, right? And Dan Lanning doesn't call the defensive plays, and he doesn't call the offensive plays. And so it makes your offensive coordinator hire probably the most important coaching hire Dan Lanning has to make as a head coach. And so it's not as if I would want to go back and say, no, it's, if I could turn back the clock, we wouldn't hire Kenny Dillingham. No, I would. If Arizona State doesn't lose to Eastern Michigan, Herm Edwards might still be there. We don't know. You never know how these things are going to play out, and you have to play the best possible hand you can on a year-by-year basis. So Dillingham going there is another thing that drew him there, and that does not reflect poorly on Oregon's program right now at all. It does not. It just means that was a close personal relationship. It got severed because Dillingham left, and so Dante Moore decided to go elsewhere. And UCLA, to their credit, got into the ring, put together what I'm sure was a pretty solid NIL package. I don't think that was the biggest reason for going. I think it was like the fourth reason that he may have left, because there's another one that you have to consider, and that's that UCLA is going to the Big Ten. And they will be in the Pac-12 for Dante's true freshman year, but then they will be in the Big Ten. They will play a Big Ten schedule. That means they will play one or both of Michigan or Michigan State. And that's an opportunity for him to play in his hometown. He's from Detroit. So not specifically his hometown, but in his home state. And one thing you have to remember with a lot of these kids is they come from places where maybe their parents aren't always able to get out to games because they've got work, right? It's not always a financial thing. Sometimes it's just a travel thing. It's like, well, I can't get out to the East Coast on a weekend because I've got to work and I've got this and that to do. But it's a heck of a lot easier if you play at 6 p.m. on a Friday, or 6 p.m. on a Saturday, rather. No matter what mom or dad's job is, he or she going to be more likely to be able to get there, play in front of family, play in front of friends. I think that's a component of it as well. Now, is he making a mistake in his personal career? You could make that argument, but I won't. I will tell you that LinkedIn Jobs is the best place to go if you've got a new hire, which every time you make a new hire feels like a high-stakes wager nowadays. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I don't think Dante Moore is necessarily making a mistake here. I think he is missing an opportunity, because if he had stayed with the Ducks and Bo Nix had come back, and by the way, don't forget the direct linkage there, right? If you're excited about Bo Nix, talked about on yesterday's show, very real potential that Dante Moore decides to go elsewhere. But I'd rather have Bo Nix for 1 year in 2023 than have an unknown quarterback situation going forward, even though Dante Moore has a lot of potential. And the best possible scenario was certainly to keep them both. But I think if you're Dante Moore, you certainly are missing the chance to learn from a really good and a really veteran quarterback in Bo Nix, 100%. However, for all of you Duck fans or anyone else out there thinking he's making a big mistake, why would you want to go to UCLA? Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to do that? We all remember who UCLA's head coach is, right? He's this guy by the name of Chip Kelly. We used to just call him Chip back in the day. And Chip Kelly just had a 5-year run with Dorian Thompson-Robinson where he became a wildly successful and winning quarterback for that football program that has not been as good as Oregon, no doubt. Ducks have owned them. They've won more games. Been that way for quite a long time. However, UCLA is still a good team and a good football program. And Chip knows what he's doing, and he knows what he is doing on the offensive side of the ball specifically. And he just took a prospect in DTR who was ridiculously raw. I mean, his true freshman tape at UCLA made you question why he was even playing quarterback. And by the time his 5th year came around, which obviously Dante won't be able to get unless we have another once-in-a-century pandemic, let's hope that doesn't happen. But even by his 4th year, DTR was a vastly improved player. And Dan Lanning has had 1 year of head coaching experience, and Will Stein has been an OC and play caller for 1 year. And Chip Kelly had 4 years at Oregon. He's now had 5 at UCLA. And look at the quarterbacks he's developed. Darren Thomas was really good. Marcus Mariota. That was a Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich recruit. That worked out pretty well. It worked out really well, you could say. And now Dorian Thompson-Robinson. There is 100% appeal here, and I don't think he's going into a bad situation. They need to add some weapons because they're going to lose, probably Zach Charbonnet to the NFL, and Jake Bobo is out of eligibility, I think. But in the age of the transfer portal, man, there's a billion receivers that you can go get. And if you're Dante Moore, you're looking for a coach that is going to be able to give you the best chance. And he told this to me in July as well. He wants to one day play on Sundays. Well, Chip Kelly has developed quarterbacks in college. That's what he has done. You need an opportunity to showcase your skills. You're going to do that at UCLA, especially once you get to the Big Ten. You need a coach who's going to be able to support you, which Chip does as the play caller and has a proven track record as a developmental quarterback coach. And you need somewhere that, at least in Dante's view, perhaps, is going to afford you the opportunity to play in front of friends and family. And I think that's part of the reason. I don't think it's the entire reason. And on the NIL front, look, I'm sure it was a factor. It's Los Angeles going to the Big Ten. There's a lot more money in the Big Ten. Totally get it. It could certainly be a factor. But based on everything that I have heard, it's not the case either. That it was just a big, fat NIL deal, and that's why he's going to UCLA. No, I think it was a factor, but I don't think it was the factor. I think it was factor number 4. I think Dillingham leaving is 1. I think playing time is 2. I think the Big Ten move is 3. I think it being Chip Kelly and his track record with quarterbacks is probably 4, and I think NIL is number 5. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but it's certainly not in the top 3. It is certainly not in the top 3 based on the information that we've got right now. So I don't think this is an indictment of Oregon. I think this is just the world of college sports now. It is a bummer. It is a bummer. It is not a calamity. It does not mean the program is going to fall into disarray. It does mean, as of this moment, Oregon doesn't have a quarterback plan beyond 2023, but they do have a plan in 2023, which is still good news. But I'm not going to try and spin this as, no, this is really a good thing. It's in the best, no, it was in Oregon's best interest to have Bo Nix come back for 2023, mentor Dante Moore for a year, and then have him be the starting quarterback of the future, maybe redshirt in 2023, and be the starter for 3 years like Marcus was. That was the best possible plan. And that's not going to come to fruition now, unless Oregon can somehow, pull a UCLA essentially and flip a late quarterback in the cycle. And that's what I want to talk about next. National Signing Day is tomorrow. The early National Signing Day is tomorrow. And a good chunk, according to Johnny, around 80% or so will sign in that early window, but not all of them will. And from a quarterback perspective, Oregon has a number of different options going forward. Number one, they still have the ability to go get a quarterback in this class. I have heard rumblings, nothing major, nothing incredibly noteworthy, but we'll say a non-zero amount of chatter that is worth mentioning on the show. And just as a general rule, if you say, well, why would you say this? Or if you don't know that, how do you know this? I will never say anything on here unless I have it on good authority from someone who I trust that it's worth mentioning. If I don't think something's worth mentioning, I won't bring it up on the show, just as a general rule of thumb. Anyway, but do you all remember the name Jaden Rashada? Jaden Rashada had committed to Miami. Then he flipped to Florida. What I have heard is that he's made a few calls. Don't know to whom, don't know about what exactly, but that he is locked into Florida at this point in time. But so was Dante Moore about 36 hours ago. And if he doesn't sign on December 21st, could be a name to follow. The other option for Oregon on the quarterback front is you try to find a late riser. And these guys happen. It's not unheard of for guys to, have strong senior seasons or start to, get their tape out there and they're flying under the radar and then they start to rise really quickly. It happens with recruits, frankly, at a number of positions. The Rhode Island offensive tackle who's in the transfer portal that Oregon has offered, whose commitment I believe is getting announced on Wednesday. Don't quote me on that because I'm kind of doing it from memory, but I'm pretty sure that's right. It's coming soon. That's a guy whose stock has risen very, very quickly. The same can happen. It's not as likely with quarterbacks because it's such an important position and there's so much tape out there and there's so much film, but that is something that Oregon, I'm sure, will be considering. And so they're trying to pull a UCLA, or they're going to try to find a late riser, or there's always the other option. And that would be the transfer portal. And I know some fans are averse to that idea or that notion, but might I remind you that Bo Nix came by way of the transfer portal. How's that one going? Was anyone upset that he announced his decision to come back? No. It's pretty crazy how time can just change so quickly and also move so slowly. But imagine, I think Bo announced his transfer to Oregon around a year ago as this show drops. I could look up the specific date, but imagine going back to November 2021. Taking a time machine right now, going back to that time, and going up to any Oregon fan and showing him that video that Bo Nix and the Oregon media department put together about Bo coming back. Just imagine what they'd say. They'd be very confused. But all this time and all this information and talk and fodder and everything, we're all excited about it. And we should be. And I do think that this is a net positive for Oregon in the quarterback department, but it doesn't mean there isn't a very real negative there. And that's that they'll be looking at the transfer portal most likely for a quarterback after 2023, which might I remind you all, we are currently, as Josh Pate would say, in the year of our Lord 2022. So there's some time on that front. A lot can change between now and then. Heck, a lot can change in 36 hours. Can a lot change in 36 months? I'm going to go out on a limb. That was too many months. Sorry. Can a lot change in 18 months? I'm going to go out on a limb and say the answer to that question is yes. The answer to the question, should you ever drive while impaired, is no. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even if marijuana is legal in that state. Driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. You know, your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. I could tell if you stood in front of me. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. Driving high is driving under the influence. Drive high, get a DUI. This message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Here's another thing about Oregon's quarterback situation. If you are going after someone in the 2023 class who's maybe not a blue chip recruit, who's maybe, someone who needs a little bit more development, maybe needs some time to build some arm strength, get in the weight room, the encouraging thing for the Ducks is right now, you'd have the opportunity to do that. And typically, guys who come in as lower rated recruits at the quarterback position are not ready to start right away. And by the way, the two best quarterbacks Oregon's had in the last 20 years, Mariota and Herbert, they were both 3 stars. Neither one of them started right away. Neither one. You can make the case in hindsight, Herbert should have started over Dakota Prukop. Okay. But Herbert also made a lot of true freshman mistakes that year and was a uniquely gifted athlete. And we see that every week. Did you see that throw that he made? He's just rolls right and he just flicks the wrist. He just throws this heat-seeking missile to Mike Williams down the sideline. I mean, he's literally one of the 3 or 4 most physically gifted quarterbacks in the entire world. And it's pretty awesome that he's our guy. Anyway, I always love shouting him out. And Kayvon Thibodeau, by the way. I'm going to take so many victory laps on that because people were so ridiculous. And I was a big defender of him. But anyway, the upside for Oregon in the quarterback situation now is if they do get a guy who needs time, he's going to have time because we know that Bo is going to be the starter. And I'll close today with this thought. Remember that guy named Ty Thompson? Yeah, I think we should continue to follow that name because Butters is in the portal. And Bo is coming back, and we don't have a quarterback on the roster, a scholarship one anyway, other than those two. You start to add it up, and if this quarterback recruiting process does not yield someone who could one day be a starter, maybe Ty Thompson becomes Oregon's starter one day after all. I'm just saying, it's not impossible. Here's the other thing. Bo Nix got hurt last year. Bo Nix got hurt this year. Thankfully, was able to continue playing in those last couple of games. And we'll see him in the Holiday Bowl too, which I'm very excited for. And by the way, still no word as I record this on Monday about Brandon Dorlus and Noah Sewell. Very, very interesting. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, Ty Thompson. If he's not in the portal right now and he decides not to go in, then he could very well be Oregon's backup going into next year too. And Bo Nix now has had some sort of injury 2 years in a row. There was a time on this show not long ago where it seemed like Ty Thompson would be destined to enter the portal and would never have a path to ever starting a game at Oregon. But that door has creaked itself back open. For better or worse, he's got another new offensive coordinator to learn from because it'll be his 3rd in his 3 years with the Ducks if he does stay for next season. He tweeted out a little black heart when Bo made his announcement. I'm just saying. We have all written him off. And I think that based on the data we've been given on him, there's some truth and fairness to that. But could it just come to the point one day where there are no other options and you have to just see what you have there, maybe hope that point never comes in 2023 because that means that Bo has really gotten hurt. But I think it's something to consider. And overall, I do think we will be all right. But yeah, it was a little bit of a bummer. I was excited about Dante Moore. I was really impressed when I saw him in person. I think he could be a really good quarterback, and I bet he shows that at UCLA. But Oregon, for 2023, quarterback situation, they're okay. It's beyond that, which is a long ways away, that we've got questions. And I'd rather have no questions in the short term and questions in the long term than have it be the other way around. I'll talk about why more on tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.